I want to start off by saying how important it is for you doing, and politicians in general doing what you're doing right now, which is sitting down for a long form conversation.
Right.
I think there's a lack of that in mainstream and stuff like that, and we don't often get to see where there's not a script, there's not something like prepared per se,
right,
where it's up in the air, we don't really know the direction it can go and stuff like that, and you kind of have to rely on a bit of the trust and stuff like that in order to see where the conversation can go. So I just want to commend you on that first and foremost. So thank you very much for doing the show. I'm very excited to have you on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. It's going to be interesting, I think.
Yeah, awesome. I'm excited. So with that, we'll kick it off so people can kind of get to know you. Take me through your transition, kind of leaving post-secondary school in that timeline to where we are now, and we can kind of go back through. And
yeah, so I went to Lockerbie for high school, and it was sort of a weird transition because I grew up in the Donovan, and I went to Lansdowne after I went to Queen Elizabeth, and then to Lansdowne for 7 and 8. And then I was supposed to go to Sudbury Secondary, but I got into a lot of fights at Lansdowne.
Yeah.
And my sister was going to secondary at the time, and she got into a fight and got really badly beaten up.
Mm.
And so my mom wanted to transfer schools, so I ended up going to Wembley. And then Wembley, all of your... I was still planning to go to secondary, but all my friends were going to Lockerbie, so I ended up going to Lockerbie.
Nice.
I graduated from Lockerbie. My mom really wanted me to get something for post-secondary, and so I had applied for a Cambrian college. I wanted TV arts, advertising, and child and youth work, and TV arts and advertising were canceled that year.
That's how it goes.
And so I got into child and youth work, and it was really interesting,
nice.
And I enjoyed it. And they had placements when I was there, so I did one at Youthdale, which is it's a large organization in Southern Ontario. Yeah. But I did this. It's kind of like a work camp. So,
interesting.
So what happens is you have kids who aren't doing well or getting in trouble with the law, but it's not really. It's more like they don't have a lot of structure in their life, and their parents aren't as tuned. And so the idea basically is instead of going to like juvie hall or something like that, you kind of provide some structure so that they get back on track.
Yeah, some
right?
form of like mentorship program.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah, so it's a very simplified structure. They have school, which is sort of introductory. You take school a little bit at a time because it's overwhelming. For a lot of the kids, it's difficult because they weren't successful in school because they didn't go regularly, or they didn't feel like they were intelligent, right? And so it's a cool little program. So I had one there, and I had another one at Sick Kids in Toronto.
Interesting.
That was I really enjoyed, and I liked the psychology side. But while I was at the two of them, they said at some point you're going to hit the ceiling, and with a college diploma you'll need a degree, right? So I ended up going to Laurentian, and I did psychology there. And then I graduated, but this is like now people just get gig work, right? It's such a normal thing in these short-term contracts, but it was really new back then. So I graduated. There's no jobs in my field. Except for these little gigs, so like 3-month contract, 8-month contract, and stuff. And so I was working construction in between, and so my boss basically said he thought there's a recession. That's why there were those little gig jobs and stuff.
Yeah.
He thought, it's recession. When it bounces back, it'll be full time somewhere. And he said, you should do an apprenticeship because right now you're a laborer. Mm-hmm. But if you come back to apply after a year when the economy picks up, and you're doing an apprenticeship. People will know that you're serious about what you're doing.
Interesting. Nice.
So I started an apprenticeship as an electrician, and I almost became an electrician. But one day I noticed that my journeyman and the other guys I worked with, it was all guys back then. Yeah. They loved being at work, and I was just paying my bills. I didn't hate it.
Yeah.
But I could probably do 4 or 5 other jobs and be just as happy. And I remember just thinking like, I'm gonna have a midlife crisis. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna be like in like 30 years or 20 years from now. Like, why did I and I not that I knew what I wanted to do, but it just wasn't a good fit for me.
Yeah, you knew what you didn't want.
Yeah. And so I think it was frustrating for my boss, who now my father-in-law.
I didn't expect that. To be honest.
But I think it was frustrating for him because it's a real opportunity to get an apprenticeship ticket and everything, and so I kind of bounced around a little bit on different things, but I ended up getting hired at Bell. I was really into computers, and like high-speed internet was coming out, so I was working at Bell, and you're sort of low man on the totem pole. So as you basically what happens in the old phone system is there's two wires going to everyone's house, right? Like now it's cell phones and everything.
Yeah.
Right? It used to be, it's called POTS, plain old telephone system. And so when there's moisture in the lines, it causes static. So in the summer, in the spring, and in the fall, you're very busy. And then in the winter, all the moisture freezes and it gets slower, and so they start laying people off. And so I wanted to get from the phone system to the internet system.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of online studying. There was a program as well. I was laid off, so through WSIB or Workman's Comp, I can't remember what era it was. They had like retraining, so I did a thing on networking. So I have all these MCSC, like Microsoft networking credentials by my name that I can point to. So I can do tech support for people sometimes. And so I was living in Coppercliff with my wife, working for Bell. Basically worked like crazy when it was through the summer, like the warmer weather, and then I'd be laid off for a couple of months. And so my debt load would get really, really high, and then I'd pay it off.
Nice.
And then I have some savings, and we'd burn through the savings, and debt load go. And it was just
we just play
weird,
catch up eventually. But
yeah. It was a cyclical thing. And so I was trying to really get into the networking side because that's what interested me.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to get all the training, to go to the manager and say, hey, I have all these skills and stuff. And so while I was doing that, what happens is you basically have to be able to build a worldwide network, like a international network. You'd never have one guy do this, right? But you have to. You set up 2 computers or 3 computers, and you have like virtual machines, and it's really dry and dull. Yeah. Right. So I would do that in the morning until about 11, and then my brain would turn to mush, and then. In Coppercliff, you go to the post office to get your mail. So I'd walk with my son to go get the mail.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Clear my head and stuff. And I was applying at Inco back then. It's Valet now. I applied Inco to see if they're hiring because I wanted to get in an IT department if they were hiring. And I think like it got to the point. The lady who was there, her name was Jen Jenkins, and it got to the point where she would hear the door open and say, "Not today." Like she just yelled
that often.
No, Jamie, nothing today.
Clockwork.
Yeah, yeah. And
amazing.
I think either tenacity or she got fed up with me, and so because there were people who were waiting to be hired who had been waiting a lot longer than me, so I got an interview and stuff, and then
persistence.
Yeah, yeah. So they hired me as a smelter worker, and I said yes, and then I said, "What is a smelter worker?" Because like I knew generally, but I wasn't quite sure exactly what it was. But I was at the point where I
want to go on IT.
It had been like at least 10 years after graduating, right? And I just I needed a full-time job that wasn't being laid off all the time, right? So my idea was I would go in and I transferred to IT, and what happened is I got involved with health and safety. Yeah. I was working in the furnaces, so the old postcards are people who like grew up my age where you see the slag being dumped. I was the guy who'd fill those.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a hot metal job, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the people I worked with, and then I had a big spill, and I got really interested in health and safety, and that's kind of what fired me. And that was that thing of earlier when I said I didn't want to be an electrician. Yeah. Like health and safety, I was like, I love this. Like it was really interesting. Yeah. I love trying to solve things, not solve it, but like you have to work really collaboratively with a lot of people. When I first got into health and safety, it was almost like a blood sport, right? You just like, that sounds weird for health and safety, but like it was very adversarial, right? So what happens with safety is you have a joint health and safety committee, and it's like people representing workers and people representing management, and for a long time that was tough. It was basically just bumping against each other and trying to, win. Yeah. And somewhere along the line, someone just like had pointed out to me, he was like, "Well, how successful are you?" And I said, "Well, anything that is in the Act, there's a bunch of rules in the Occupational Health and Safety Act, right? Anything in there, I can force people to do, right? I can make management do. Anything that's not in there, they don't have to do, and we can't get done, right? Right. And we started working a lot more towards like how do we just make the place safer instead of trying to like score points for our team? Right. And I think they were doing that at other plants and other mines, but at mine it was always this sort of like score points for your team and win, right? And then as it shifted towards like how do we make the place safer? Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's the goal, right? Things started working.
Not
a lot
who can
better.
spend money, who can save, or
right. Yeah. Right. It just became like what's the right thing to do and how do we get towards it? Yeah. And it's not perfect or anything, but it it is a whole different mentality. And so that's what I was doing up until I was elected. Because I was a furnace operator and a safety guy, like safety rep. And then the last 5 years, that was my full-time job, was in health and safety at the smelter.
Okay, so before you got elected, and we can get to that shortly, but I'm curious, in that time frame, what was something that you learned that then will pay off, having learned that lesson, like in the last few years, like as the politician?
I think the number one thing as a politician is that a big mistake that I see, that I'm probably guilty as well, but is that you'll make mistakes assuming you know everything. So, and I've told this story at Queen's Park a couple times. So I worked a lot with a couple of superintendents, but one of them, his name was Rick Melanson. And we had an issue with lighting. And people were complaining about lighting. And this is like the early days of when LED lighting was coming out. And there was some good incentives to bring them in and a little cheaper on your bill. And so Rick and I worked together and we came up with this plan. And it really felt like a win-win plan. Like, we're going to have lighting for people who are frustrated because there's areas that are really dim. We'd improve the lighting. We were going to bring in electricians on the weekend on overtime. And so there's a little more money in their pocket. And who doesn't like overtime, that kind of thing, unless you're forced to. But like, it was a sort of... And honestly, like Monday morning or whenever we were coming in, I thought people were going to high-five us. Like, it was like a John Woo movie where slow motion and doves are flying behind you and stuff like... And right? Yeah, it was going to be just the best, right? And it was the opposite. People were mad.
Really?
Because we had put the lights, basically they're shining in people's eyes, or forklifts are hitting them, or when they're walking somewhere, they're bumping their head on it. And so we had this really good idea. We were solving an issue that the workers wanted us to solve.
Yeah.
But we didn't talk to them about how to do it. And we basically blew a bunch of money. And had to redo everything because we didn't connect with people.
Yeah, so there's a bridge, bridge that needed to be.
Yeah, and so out of that I learned you can do a lot of things wrong with good intention.
Interesting.
And as a politician, I see that sometimes where legislation comes through.
Yeah.
And it's rushed through by people who don't work in that industry and haven't consulted fully with the industry. And it's great, and it's a good headline, but the outcome doesn't help people. And so I always think about, like, Rick and I, in the slow motion doves and the high fives, right? That, like, with the best of intention, we got a lot of things wrong.
Still
and
basically, a lot of people.
And had to go back and fix it. And so that's the one I always think about, like you don't know everything. Even though, like, as an elected official, you have access to a lot of experts. You have it's easy to pick up the phone and say, have a question about something. Usually most people return your calls. But if you're not really talking to people, like I know very little about agriculture, right? Because Sudbury is a mining town. It's all rock, and not that we don't have little farms nearby, but the core city of Sudbury where I am, we don't have farms, right? So if I talk to one farmer and he says, this is what we need, and I don't talk to dozens other or different people, I'm going to get it wrong. I'll fix maybe what that one guy wants, or maybe I'll get it wrong because I didn't hear him properly.
Right.
But it feels good to do something quick.
Yeah.
But you make mistakes when you do things quick.
Right.
Especially
in that industry too. Like, I don't find, or I've found working in like the blue collar fields and the sector and stuff like that and all those jobs, I find it's been very, very, nobody likes change.
Right.
Like in general, but especially in this industry.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's tough. And so, man, I can only imagine the struggle to implement anything new, especially with the good intention behind it. It's like, no, let's do it. That's crazy.
Yeah, and it wasn't, I think the thing that stands out of it wasn't just that people were frustrated, they were mad. Right? Like it was better before you got here. You know what I mean? Because like you're trying to do a job and there's a spotlight in your eyes.
Yeah.
Right? And so like someone I think probably just took a bar and smashed it, right? Because they couldn't work with it, right? So their problem that they had before, we made worse trying to fix. And that's the part I always think about as a politician, like I especially like, the world of politics is more polarizing. You're like there are a lot of people on the far right and the far left and and if you're not talking to people with a different point of view, like you don't have the whole story, right? Even if you don't agree, even if you don't, you've got to hear like what the context is, because sometimes there's something that is really important that's not ideological or whatever else, right? It's, you know, and there's things that you don't expect or you don't know because the people in different fields, they're experts in their field, right?
Yeah.
They'll tell you, like, one of the things from safety, I think it just popped in my head. It was a weird thing because a lot of like when you're the worker safety rep, a lot of it is just negotiating and hearing from people and finding out what the barriers are, like what's possible, like, you know, I can't work past 8 or whatever, right? You know, what are your boundaries, you know, and then helping them find a solution together. And so I found early on that, like, if you talk to the right people and ask them, like, you know, what's the issue? What are we trying to solve? What do you think we should do? Then, and, you know, what are the boundaries that we can, you know, work around and stuff? And if you present it all to them and say, like, what do you think? Usually you come up with a solution. And then they thank you, even though it's, like, it's all their work. You just help them navigate it and put it onto a page or a whiteboard or something so they can see it clear. But, like, the solutions are there in any organization or anything. If you talk to people who really do it for a living, day in and day out. And oftentimes I find in leadership or as politicians, someone tells you something and you're like, oh, I know how to fix that. Right? And then you make mistakes.
It's not that simple. Well, execution's a lot more gray than it is one color or the other, trying to decide. It's never as clear. I mean, but how do you decide who you listen to in, like, the rights, the lefts, the, like, what industry professionals, like, how do you make that decision on who you, like, consult with?
It's a lot. So it's interesting because people come to my office and a lot of people, some people don't, but a lot of people will tell me that they did or did not vote for me. And it's interesting to hear, but, like, the reality is I represent everybody. So it doesn't matter. I mean, you know, I appreciate people who voted for me, but, like, all MPPs, all MPs, whatever, it doesn't matter if you voted or not. You still have access to your, you know, provincial or municipal or federal representative. That makes sense. So you have to listen to everybody, but it doesn't mean that you have to agree with everybody. Right? And I don't mean you dismiss people that you don't agree with.
No, of course not.
But I think it's important. I had a friend who was more right-wing than I was, right? And he would call me out on things, and we would argue and have good arguments. And I really enjoyed it. And a couple of times, like when just Facebook was social media, you know, primarily, there was some article I posted, and I can't remember what it was, but it was like lefty.left.com or something, and he was like, come on, man. He goes, like, you didn't even see how, like, verified this was. And I can't remember what the article was, but I wanted to believe it was true, right? And that more and more has become the reality, right? Because it's hard to verify what's legitimate news and what's not, and what's right, and what's advertising posing as news, and what's just propaganda outright or whatever, right? So
the last few years did not help, like with COVID.
Everyone getting to their own algorithm and their own bug.
Everybody, that did not help.
So I think it's important, like, when people reach out, to consider, like what are they saying, and does it make sense, and am I right? Like, if I don't agree, am I right, and why am I right, and why do I believe that? Because people have become, like, politics has almost become like a team sport. Like, where you're rooting for your team.
A little bit, You
know what I mean? And we have to get away from that, because most people aren't. I'm a New Democrat, right? So, like, most people, there are a bunch of people in every party, right, who are conservative or liberal or New Democrat or a Green Party or a Communist Party or some of the smaller ones, right? Their core value, but they also appreciate other things, or they recognize good work when it happens, right? I meet people during the election who will say, like, I'm not a New Democrat, but I like you. I like the work you do.
Like for X, Y, Z,
right? And I'm sure in other ridings, there's people who are like, look, I'm not conservative, but I like your work, or I'm not liberal, but I like whatever else, right? And so we got to get away from sort of the team sport mentality, because most people in every riding, like, that's just the area you represent. Most people in every riding, there's a bunch of people who are card holding members of, like, my mom is always going to vote NDP because I'm her son, right? But I really think a lot of people going into an election, because their lives are so busy with everything going on, they go, I kind of like them. They're all right. Or they go, well, who else is there? Right? Like,
Yeah.
there are a lot of people who live and breathe and love politics the way somebody loves the Leafs or whatever else.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, their life is really busy, and they're bringing their kids to hockey, or they're, you know, they're going to work, and they're
they don't
and
have time per se.
they're kind of paying attention, but it's not their day in and day out.
Yeah, and what information do they get from
Yeah.
where? Yeah, how do they cipher what's worth listening to or what's not? Yeah.
And
It's
so,
tough.
I think, like, it's important to, like, as a politician, just do your best, like, do good work, you know,
Yeah.
but also listen to people, and especially it's important to listen to people that you disagree with.
Yeah.
Not
That's tricky.
Yeah,
That's
it's
easier
interesting
said than
because the person who, like, you know, social media, you get the rawest form of feedback, right? So the person
Oh, yeah.
who's like, you're a commie, or whatever, it kind of, at a certain point, you just get rhino skin, right? And it
Yeah.
washes over you. Like it's become very ugly, and we need
Yeah.
to change that style of discourse. But the person who says, you're wrong because of this, those are the emails or letters or tweets, whatever,
Yeah.
that I read the most, because I'm like they took the time to, like, articulate why. And so like, am I wrong? Am I off base?
Yeah.
What else I look into? And I'll phone around and find out about different things. Like, I heard this, and so does that make sense, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you want to have, like, good parliament or good legislative assembly at provincial level, like, you really need to listen to the people, like, who you represent, and find out how aligned you are. And, like, we get caught in those algorithms and bubbles too, right?
All the time,
Where
yeah.
we're all like, oh yeah, we're our line's the best.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, or I even find like, if I see too much of something or someone, I'm like, ugh. Like,
Yeah.
it's just kind of bothered by it. Like, it just has to be in your face often.
Yeah.
No matter what it is, or whether I'm like, oh, I like this one day, and it's all like how I'm feeling that day.
Yeah.
Right. And you can get people who are always feeling bad, and then they're just, oh, you're always in their feed doing good things, and then they're like, oh, I hate this guy. Now it's like, it's flipped.
Right.
And it's like, it's a weird. Yeah. It's a weird construct. I'm not quite. I don't know. I think overall it's just doing good work. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's synonymous with anybody.
Yeah.
So.
I was gonna say music can be like that, where you, like, you hear a song, and in the morning you love it, and at the end of the day you're like, God.
For the 11th time.
Right? Like,
I'm playing a podcast. Oh man. Question for you, actually.
Yeah.
We'll kind of back up a bit. How'd you get into, like, where did the interest in politics stem from? Like, where did that begin? Because that's a very, very big shift from working in the smelter and valet and health and safety and IT to.
yeah, no, so it wasn't really on the radar. It was, like, you know, one of those things of maybe when I retire or something like that.
Nice.
But so what happened was when it used to be CVRD, but when Valet bought Inco, we ended up on strike for a year in 2009, 2010.
That's right, I remember that.
And so I've always been active in my union, involved in my union. I'm proud to be a steelworker, that kind of stuff. But it was always the health and safety side of it. But I got really involved with the strike because I have a decent sense of what's fair, and what was happening just didn't feel fair.
Right.
Right? Like, a lot of it had to do with removing benefits from pensioners and changing pension plans for people, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Tough.
if you want to do that, negotiate it. So in exchange, we get what? Because in mining, the amount we were getting paid was about middle of the pack, but it was middle of the pack because we live close to where we work, and we have pensions and benefits compared to backpack miners who fly in, fly out, and stuff, right?
That makes sense.
So what's the exchange? Because for years and years, steelworkers took lower wages because they were getting a pension as part of their income, right? And it was a really tough, ugly strike, like one we hadn't seen before. They had scabs coming in. So I got very involved with that strike. You know, the two big marches we had through town, I helped organize those. And so what I noticed before the strike is that, like, during an election, we're probably heading into a federal election soon, right? The way you hear the conversation coming up. God. And so you'll hear a lot of politicians talk about how important workers are and how great workers are. And I was on strike for a year, and it's a big place, right? We have 10 picket lines, 24 hours a day. And I never saw our local politician was liberal at the time. I never saw him, right?
No.
I saw him in the news a couple of times. But, like, at the time, he was the Minister of Northern Development and Mines. And
never there.
I think he met with the president once or twice, but, like, I don't remember seeing him at picket lines. I didn't see him. And so but I did see Jack Layton, who is the leader of the National Party, right? And Frost Jelena and Claude Graval, Charlie Angus, right? And so New Democrats showed up like on a regular basis. They were in our marches with us. They were speaking at Queen's Park and the House Commons.
Yeah.
And so, he, you know, there's a reputation that politicians lie all the time. I felt like politicians had lied to me because all these people who are like, workers are important.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect, it's not that I wanted a politician. I mean, I'd love to come down and say, hey, you're right. And I got your back. But like, to not come and say, hey, what's going on? And what do I need to know?
From the people.
Right?
On the front line, literally.
Right? Like, why are you on strike? And why do you feel? And what do you think has to happen? And I just thought, like, well, you're supposed to represent. Like, this is a pretty big issue in your city, right?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, certain opinions are valued and some aren't.
Yeah.
It's like, well,
it's kind of how I felt, right? That like, that one party clearly showed up when workers needed them, or at least I needed them.
yeah.
And then, as well, the Labour Council, the Ontario Federation of Labour, different unions showed up and showed support. And so I grew up in the Donovan on Cabot Street, so it's Sudbury housing, right? It's geared income.
Yep.
And so when you grow up poor, there's this real sort of like I'll help you move if you help me move, like
Oh, yeah, like favor for favor type thing.
Yeah, you have
nice.
debts, not debts, but you just kind of like you owe a favor, you whatever. So when the strike ended, I volunteered for the NDP to put signs up and handle flyers and stuff like that. And then I got involved with the Labour Council because different unions were coming out, and I wanted to sort of pay that debt, you know.
Yeah.
And so eventually, I was the president of the Labour Council, and then I was on the Riding Association representing. I was really involved with Labour.
Yeah.
So I was a Labour rep for the federal Riding Association for the NDP, and it was an interesting thing that happened. So about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, I can't remember exactly, before the election, there was this decision made about laundry workers for the hospital. So the hospital has a laundry facility, and then sort of across Lily Creek, like as the crow flies, right across from the hospital, across Lily Creek, where Memorial Hospital, the old Memorial was, the laundry facility is there, and the equipment was breaking down. And so there's these 27 women, one guy who had worked there.
Yeah.
It's basically unskilled labor, and I can't remember, they made like $27 an hour.
Right on.
And so these are all people who have like small mortgages and who like without this job, they're going to have minimum wage jobs because it's unskilled, right?
Yeah.
So when they lose these jobs, they don't get to contribute to the economy the same way. And it was a real issue in town and lots of support for it. I remember there's a poll, I remember it was like, Sudbury.com now, but it might have been Northern Life back then, or Sudbury Star, and it was like 76% of the people were supportive of like finding a solution for this. And the Liberal government at the time had decided they were going to ship it to Hamilton and back, and that would be cost savings. And I couldn't wrap my head around, like maybe short term because you're not paying to rebuild the infrastructure.
Right at the minute, but
like delivery and gas and plus getting the work done at the same time, right? And so it was a real important issue in the city, and ultimately it was lost. And I remember, from memory, I think there was a local dry cleaner who said, like, I'll take on the work, I'll hire as many people as I can
from that,
and I'll give it back when the equipment's rebuilt.
Amazing,
right? So lots of community support, lots of and so they lost that fight. I walked over. They had sort of a goodbye rally for them on the last day. It was a Saturday in the middle of the winter. And I thought it was going to be like a blockade. And what really touched me on this is the last load was coming out on a transport. There's all these laundry workers outside. There's different people with their union flags and stuff, and supporters from the community who weren't affiliated to unions, just regular workers who just saw how unjust this was. And the truck came out, and I was kind of like slowly walking on the road, and they were like, no, we're not, this isn't a blockade, this isn't and the guy stopped the truck and got out and was hugging all these workers, and that's when I made the connection that like he's just another guy, right? He's just a worker, just a part like of they it as
well. Whoa.
Right? And so they got a relationship because they see each other all the time when they're loading and unloading the truck. And the president of their union of these 28 workers, she said at one point she met with the MPP, but she really felt like it was just so that if the press came, he could say, well, I did meet with them, right? And then I don't know really what was said because it's secondhand, but this is what she said at this rally that we had. Yeah. She said, we met, and he said, I don't know if there's anything I can do, and I don't know if it's worth fighting for. And that really landed the wrong way for me. Like,
Yeah, I can imagine.
you know, and so I'd rather fight and lose than not at all.
Yeah.
So anyways, I remember leaving there. I'd walked there. My dog was a lot younger then, right? So endless energy. So I'd walked there with my dog, and I was walking back with my dog, and it was probably an hour to get back. And I just remember thinking, like, Sudbury needs a Frangeliana. And then I got home, and I was like, I told my wife, I'm going to be the Frangeliana of Sudbury. And my wife was like, what are you talking about? Because she wasn't on the walk or anything.
Yeah.
Right? So I just decided I'm going to run. I think I'm going to run. And so it wasn't as quick as that because we wanted to talk to our kids. We wanted to find out really what it entailed and stuff. But that was where I just was thinking like I want to do this. And part of that connection is they asked me to speak at one point.
Yeah.
Because I was president of Labor Council, and I said, I was thinking from a union perspective because you're elected into your role as a president or a rep or whatever, right? And I said, if you have leadership that doesn't represent you, you have to vote them out. That's just. But I wasn't thinking provincially. I was just thinking like that's how it works in my union.
Just for there
that's
in the
how,
union, yeah.
And like it applies provincially as well. But I wasn't thinking vote them out and vote for me.
Right.
And then when I was walking home, I just was thinking like, man, I wish we had like someone like France because she was so solid.
Yeah, she was involved. She was solid. Yeah.
And that's kind of what started like the gears going in the back of my head, and then we had to figure out what it meant to be an MPP and what it looked like, and because I had no idea how to start off. Right. I know how to volunteer in a campaign, but I don't know how the whole thing works. So and that's kind of where the switch was.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right on. So there's so many things I want to get into. But I think this is an important question to ask you. So I know mental health is important, and we're going to talk about that in a few seconds. But how do you decide what you represent or what you get into? Because I know your schedule is very busy. Right? Like we've had this plan for about 2 months almost.
Yeah.
We've talked about it for a while and stuff. So I'm glad it came to fruition. I'm just like flabbergasted how busy somebody could be, and you're very, very in the public eye. You're posting like multiple times a day on everything, right? There's a lot of engagement going on. So yeah, like you are busy, right? And my question is, how often or how do you decide what do you focus your energy in? Like what gets your priority and stuff like that for like, this aligns with the values of the NDP or with you personally or family? Like how does that?
It's weird because I was really tired last week. I think when I woke up, I was going to bed. I was really tired, and I told my son I don't want to go to work tomorrow. And he said, "Yes, you do." And I was like, "No, I'm tired. I want to." And he said, "No, I know you. You're happy when you're busy."
Yeah.
So
I see.
And so I've always been like that. So. When I go on vacation, usually when I go on vacation, I go to camp, and my in-laws have a camp about an hour from here.
Yeah.
But even when I'm there, it's usually there's a couple of trees that are going to fall over, so we take them down and we split them or whatever else. So it's not like a ton of work to do.
Yeah.
But I can't just sit there and do nothing.
No, you can't.
So so I've accepted that I'll probably never retire. Not that I'll retire from work at some point, but I'll volunteer or sit on a board.
Some projects that you're doing.
I need something. Right? It's just how I'm wired. I'm not happy when I'm not busy, and so I love being busy, and so that translates into me being an MPP. And sort of as a rule of thumb, in my calendar is it's a balance between happy wife, happy life.
Smart.
And if I'm free, book it. So in the calendar there'll be spots where it'll say like going to see Avengers with my kids, and so unless there's something urgent that's happening, if I'm trying to think of something, the Greenbelt scandal that happened, or I don't even know if that would pull me into it. So it have to be something urgent here in Sudbury that was happening, right? Like, so the supervised consumption site losing its funding, right? So if we got that announcement that day, I'd work things around to be at a press conference, draw attention to it. But if it's something that could wait, if it was this interview, then we'd have to schedule it another time because
a free thing.
What I'm doing with my family has to be as important as what I'm doing in the community, or else at some point I won't have my family anymore, right? They'll just they won't have time for me either.
Right.
So we do that sort of happy wife, happy life, and that's sort of anything for my family. It'll be booked in. Yeah. And then anything else that's free in my calendar, my staff basically will book it.
Nice. Yeah.
And so some of it is things that I'm interested in. Some of it are people who reach out to the office and said, I want to meet with you.
Yeah,
Some of it is
yeah.
like, as a learner, I'm very visual, so I find it easier if I go and I see firsthand what you're doing or what's going on, you know?
Yeah.
And then part of it really is just, I'm very interested in what's going on around town, right? And so I like to be a part of things and see what's happening.
Yeah.
And really, you know, I say often at Queen's Park, like, we're all renting our seats, right? There's very few people who are going to be in that position for their entire career from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
Most careers are 1 term, 3 terms at the most. Like, they're, you know, and you can last longer, but the reality is you have a short window to do as much good for people as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's important to work as hard as you can during that time. It's very rewarding. You have this real opportunity to connect with people and you know, to have conversations and build relationships and get a better understanding of what's happening. So so it's a mix of me liking being busy and being curious,
right?
And the fact that everyone knows your phone number and your and your, you know, Instagram or Twitter, and
it gets dangerous. I can imagine. Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that answer. But on that, with like continuing on, how do you? Because it's very, very, very important, right? The mental health and everything that's going on, like worldwide, right? How do you take care of your own mental health? Like, how do you, is it that scheduling of like the family time and stuff like that, you're staying busy with those people, like the kids, the wife, stuff like that? Or is it just like you have your own rituals that you do or routine?
There's, I think, so we have my dog that was in the earlier story died from old age last year, but we have 2 rescues now.
Nice.
One's a husky and the other one's a puppy.
Cute.
Not like a year old, but so they need constant exercise. So no matter what, there's a walk of about an hour every day. And for the husky, he gets 2. So sometimes there's 2 of them.
Jeez.
So that that helps because exercise helps.
Yeah.
You know, and it's weird because a lot of politicians like this from different, like, I'm friends with people from all different parties, right?
Right.
Whoa,
interesting. Really?
Yeah. So you sacrifice yourself first, right? So like you eat protein bars and gummy bears and don't have lunch, right? And like you have dinner late at night, or you know what I mean? Like there's all these things to make other things work. And so it's very easy to like grab fast food while you're going somewhere else and skip working out that day. And working out can just be like going for a walk, right?
Right, yeah.
Because you've got so many things to finish.
Right.
And so I think part of that is in the schedule, recognizing how important like your personal life is.
Yeah.
I think listening to yourself too, and to others. My daughter, for example, almost never, I have a great relationship with my kids, but my daughter will almost never say, hey, we should hang out. But she will say, we haven't had sushi in a while. Right? And so I think sometimes she just wants to have sushi, but I also hear like, we haven't hung out in a while. Right?
Yeah.
Or last week when I was telling my son I don't want to go to work, I love everything when I'm there, but in the morning when I look at my calendar and I go, oh, why did I do all these things? Then I know I need to schedule some time off just to recharge.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just first thing in the morning, I look at the calendar and be like, oh my God, I'm busy until 8:30 tonight. Why did I say yes to all this stuff?
Yeah.
Right? And there's a joke in the office, right? That I'll say, everybody hates tomorrow, Jamie. Because Jamie today thinks tomorrow's a great idea.
Oh, it's great.
Tomorrow, Jamie's like, I don't have there's no meals.
It's like, why am I doing this? When do I eat?
Yeah, right? And then, so most of the time I enjoy all that, but the mornings or the times where I'm like I'm burning myself out of getting tired, I'll book some time to take a break and catch up and and just reset.
Right on. So you're pretty self-aware that way.
I try to be. Mental health got really important to me when I was at the smelter.
Yeah.
We had, like, I was part of the first sort of mental health committee they had.
Interesting.
I worked with a guy named Keith Hansen from the management side to work on this, like, sort of mental health first aid is like a real sort of course, but this was sort of a crash course in mental health. So this was like about an hour, and really what it was, the thing we stole this example from someone else, like the idea of it, but he said, you know, if you walk into the lunchroom and someone is holding their arm and it's bleeding, you immediately say like, are you okay, and what can I do? And but if you walk in the lunchroom and you see someone crying, you kind of tiptoe backwards. Right?
Walking on
you
eggshells
hope they didn't see you. They didn't, right? Because you don't know what to do. And so this was sort of here's what to do, and here's, and some best practices and stuff. And so I really enjoyed all of that and found it really helpful. And it was around the time of the Bell Let's Talk stuff coming out, and the wider awareness of it. And then, like I've talked before about having mental health challenges. We had like a worker killed at the smelter and had some real struggles afterwards, and didn't realize until I did a speech about this for Labor Day once, or for workers the day of mourning, because we're talking about mental health. And so I shared my story, and it starts off with my wife crying. And then, but the story isn't really about my wife having a mental health problem. It's my wife worried about me because I am, and I don't see it. Right? And so what had happened is she's driving my daughter to school, and all of a sudden, like, the light turns red. She's near McDonald's on Notre Dame. Yeah. And the light turns green, and the car behind honks the horn, and my daughter is telling me my wife was crying, right? And so what was happening is I was having a real hard time because of the fatality in our workplace. And I was just powering through, but I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't, like, I was really, really having, in hindsight, seeing this now, right? It's easier. But at the time I thought, like, it'll just get better. I'll just get to Sunday, and then I'll get to the next week, and I'll get, but I was really, really struggling. And so I think recognizing that and being able to say it. And what was interesting is when the first time I told that story, for like a month afterwards, people would come over to me and just tell me, like, my dad attempted suicide when I was younger.
Jeez.
Right? I take some medication for stress. And a friend of mine who also had a hard time after the fatality, he said, you become a lighthouse, right? It's a safe area, and people know it's safe to tell you something because you've shared something personal, right?
Yeah.
And we really got to get to the point where people feel more comfortable talking about it, because that helps, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you realize it's not just you, because the stat is 1 in 3. But, like, no one's putting their hand up.
Oh, right? No. To your point, I'll share it now. I have a really cool project that I'm in the works of. Like, I'm preparing it now, and, like, hiring a producer, like, friend of ours and stuff too. Because with the 5 Cent City panel and stuff, like with Zach and then with Michael, I'm going to host the two of them, and we're going to package, like, because each of them have a very incredible story in how they've kind of overcame their mental health, and how they go back and how they overcome certain things. And not even just that, but like you said, it's now that you've shared this thing and they've all shared these things, other people come to them and they're able to help those people, right? Yeah. Which is huge. And we're doing a panel where we're going to film it and produce it at, like, a high quality, like a bunch of cameras, stuff like that, at Zach's gym. And then we're going to package that and then, like, send it off to different school boards. And we're like, hey, that's cool. I think the best way to do it, because I think there is a gap when it comes to certain individuals, whereas it's easier for, I think it's, at least from what I imagine and what the three of us have kind of talked about and brainstormed and gone through, Jamie, is we'll look at different people, we'll look at our stories, and we're in this space where we're talking, or we're around, or we're in the audience, or planning the talks, or sitting in on them, right? And we see a bit of, like, a disconnect where it's tough to look up to somebody if they're still going through those things, or if they keep falling back into that cycle. And I'm not talking about mental illness, I'm talking mental health specifically, right? Because I think that they get misconstrued a little bit. Agree or disagree, but that's just how I see it. And I think that's where we're looking at, and we're like, oh, I keep going back into these depressive states. It's not an illness, it's just my mental health. I don't know how to take care of it. And then whereas I look at them, and even just my past experiences with what I've dealt with, being able to come through it, come out of it full circle, and then, like with Michael's story and then with Zach's story and stuff, right? Just easy examples. And then seeing what they've kind of gone through and how they've come out of it, and how they promote, like, the healthy, challenge yourself, growth mind, like, just, hey, we went from this really terrible experience with no resources and nobody to talk to. What do you do in that situation, right? Because it's like you're saying, it's like, if you need to have more people to talk to, we need to normalize that a bit more. And I don't know if there is a solution, but I think that's the beginning of one. So that's kind of, that's like what the project is. The idea is like, hey, a panel, I host it, the three of us talk about it, and then we package it and go, hey, this is the conversation that's being missed. I think, or just here's an option, or here's a resource, and then we're gonna, like, put it on YouTube, put it on stuff, so it's like a bit more easier to digest as a group. Instead of, like, trying to go and get in front of different crowds, it's like, well, now here's, everybody can see it, right? Just more resources like that, I think, are
and there's a real appetite for that, because So when I was on the mental health working group, like with the steelworkers, and it was actually the guards union, steelworkers. I'm trying to think of else, ballet. Everyone basically had reps from different people who worked at ballet, right?
Yeah.
And so there was a mental health day, and we had this sort of like some information for people.
Yeah.
And so what we did is there's sort of you get changed and you walk towards the bus that brings you to where you're going in the plant. And so we put a table full of resources like over here.
Smart.
Right? So hey, if you have any issues with mental health, don't go in the straight line with everyone else. Go over there and get something. Right?
Yeah.
Like we didn't make so like it's tough
smart
enough.
to have it, but it's not.
Yeah, right? And so
tougher.
so we did okay. It was fine,
Nice.
but afterwards we started looking at like, well, if we want to normalize this, we want people talking about it. How do we make it easier for people? How do we make it? And so the ballet's come a long way. Steelworkers and stuff like really, it's an industry where we rub dirt in it, right? We fix a lot of things by exploding them and hitting them with with hammers.
Those are tough, like men and women, though.
Right? Yeah.
Too,
And so that I haven't been there for 6 years, but the needle's moved a lot and in terms of stuff. But one of the things we said was when we talked to people was like, we have some information like you might not need it, but someone on your crew might. And there is a lot of like
interesting.
Yeah, your work crew is like your family, right? You're with them at least as much time. Sometimes it's more if you're on shift work, you're working at midnight because your family's sleeping, right?
Yeah.
And so that idea of like, well, I need to have this so I can take care of my work family.
Yeah.
Really helped out for people, and it also allowed people who wanted it for themselves to pick it out without feeling stigmatized. Like,
right?
Like you guys are okay, but I'm
like,
gonna get this because there's something wrong with me.
I'm the one crying in the corner.
Yeah, right. And getting away from there's something wrong with me because there's all these other things like if you sleep funny, and you're like, I got a kink in my neck. I don't know, my pillow must be, no problem saying that, right?
Yeah, it's weird.
But like someone who's like suffering with depression or anything else, right? I'm talking like low level mental health things. You never talk about it.
Never.
Right? You just and so we've got to get away from that because we're all kind of dealing with it to a certain extent, right? Or someone we know or care about is because some of the way we ended up forming this mental health group was there were people at work who were distracted at work because of family members, right? It wasn't necessarily their burden. It was like worried about their son or
like
daughter.
Your wife being worried about you. Type.
Right? And so it's a lot more prevalent, and we've moved a lot, just as society, right? The fact
amazing.
The fact that this to be part of a podcast and not a very special podcast.
Right.
Like,
amazing. Yeah. Just classic conversation we can have. Yeah. That's cool. Especially in in men as well, specifically like us stubborn breed. But, especially like smelter workers and mine. Oh man. That's good to know that like there is like a shift. But I've met and you've met, we've met countless people being in the community. You, I'm sure, tenfold more than I have. But I'm curious, who is someone that stood out to you or that stood out to you in the past years that it could be for either their story, their values or something like that, but who has stood out to like somebody that stood out to you in the community that's or even somebody you've met along the way in the last handful of years that you like to almost shout out or like shed light on their story that you maybe heard or
there's a lot of people. I think the one that pops to mind first and foremost would be Denise Sendel. So the crosses were changed downtown. That was because Denise's son Miles died from overdose. And his cross originally wasn't there. It was across from the fire station.
Yes.
And so the fire chief went to talk to Denise and her family and said, this is really hard for my members because they respond to overdoses on a regular basis, right? And this is a reminder of not being successful. And there's a lot of times where there not successful, right? Because they're called out as paramedics. They're called out.
Yeah, tough.
And so it's hard, right? It's a really tough, like every city is facing this challenge. Sudbury is, for a while, we're leading the pack. And it's not that things have gotten better in Sudbury. It's just that other Sault Ste. Marie, Thunder Bay, Timmins might be close. I can't remember if we're third or fourth. Are escalating so much that they're starting to pass us. So there's failure all across the province when it comes to opioid epidemic and overdoses, But so the police chief came in and said it's very hard. We'd like to find another location. And Denise has been open that she thought it was going to be, behind Coniston somewhere, or you know what I mean, like out of sight, out of mind. And working with the mayor and I guess city council, they chose that spot, which I think is really brave of the city. Like,
Yeah.
to put crosses reminding you that people are dying in the center, because this isn't I mean, you hear about the war on drugs, but this isn't the patriotic sort of jingoistic war where,
No.
are proud soldiers. These are people like suffering with addictions,
Yeah.
suffering with drug use, poison drug supply and stuff. And we put them at one of the busiest intersections in town so that we remember this and we're dedicated to it. And so it isn't just Denise, because I know she has a good support structure. I know
Yes.
there's people who help and volunteer with her. But I think whenever I see somebody like that who's in a place of pain where it's easier to not be front and center, who chooses to do that,
Yeah.
that I find inspiring. And especially when it's
Yeah.
just regular people. Like, it's my job as an MPP to go in front of a mic and to
Right, and
say
do-
stuff,
yeah.
right? It's like, I signed up for this, right?
Yeah.
But like, someone like Denise saying, we need to do something. We need to do better. We need to take care of people. We need to recognize these are family members, right?
Yeah.
I find that inspiring. Similarly, there was Jason Cheney and Jordan Fram died at Inco. There was a rock slide that buried them. And the Fram family came together and basically told that story again and again, which is really, really tough, but became spokespeople for the need to change mining legislation. And so it's a very similar story to Denise's, where they took a thing where I don't know what I would do if it was my son.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd want to be front and center, even though like I'm an MPP and because you don't know how you're going to respond. But Wendy was the main spokesperson, then her daughter afterwards. But the whole family was there all the time saying, we need to change these legislation, we need to fix it. And the Ministry of Labor at the time said, we're not doing this, right? And then eventually it was like, we're not going to do I'm trying to think of what is an inquest we're going to do anyways. But they ended up changing the regulations. They had some, subject matter experts get together and they made change. And anything like that where it's average people doing amazing things. Like I think 5 Cent City is an example of that,
Oh,
right?
it's an amazing thing.
5 Cent City is just a bunch of regular people who said, I got an idea.
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah. I love them all, and I wanted to actually mention it before I'll let you finish a sec. I appreciate it, but
No, I was wrapping up there.
perfect.
That's just another example, right? Of just I'm always inspired by just like regular people doing really cool things.
Yeah, and that's where I first actually heard you speak like years ago there. But with that event, I was talking to a few friends of mine about this, and it like bugs us that you're the only politician that we know of that shows up.
Yeah, I don't know why.
That it's weird.
Yeah,
It's not like to me it's not like it's frustrating, but I can only imagine it to like the other members on like the squad
right.
who are more invested when they're like, oh yeah, it's like, oh, because like that was actually the driving force of having you on as well. Like because I met you there, heard you speak, I'm like, oh, like you feel more relatable. I don't feel like you're just like you have things memorized,
Right. Yeah.
That's all right. It's more of a trust thing, but yeah. So I don't know. I think it's weird. It's very weird to me.
Yeah, I don't know why. So like I mentioned earlier, there was that rally for the laundry workers, and my MPP wasn't there, and I was really angry. And so now being in the role, like there's just times where you can't. So
you're right.
My birthday's at the end of the month. We're not going to be. I'm going to be in Toronto through the entire weekend. My birthday's on Saturday, because of other commitments that I have, and I just can't make it back, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a variety of reasons why people can't be at certain things.
Yeah.
So there's also the, there's a lot of these sort of hate protests towards trans kids and stuff, right? And I try to show up whenever I can at those. And I know there's other people who want to be there and they can't make it.
Yeah.
Right? So I think there's some people who just, for whatever reason, don't want to go or can't go in their schedule. But
yeah, fair.
But
it is the timing. I mean, yeah, it's tough. Yeah, I can
but
see
it's a really cool event
every year.
And I think like maybe the first year you wouldn't go because you don't know what it is and you're trying to balance your schedule. But I don't know, after sort of seeing it,
4th and 5th year are pretty huge.
Yeah, and the feedback is very positive, and and just to sort of check it out, right? And so I don't know why but I'm sure there's stuff that they go to that I've missed, right? And some stuff is just maybe you don't have that connection and you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know.
I feel it just covers like the multiple, like just like a multitude of like everything though. Like it covers the mental health. You hear the stories, you cover it, and you meet the people. Like I don't know, it checks a lot of boxes for what I think would be an event an MP would be looking towards, or any politician really, for that matter, would look to participate in. But.
Well, I've met people there who have gone for the first time, like while I was there, because I try to stay as long as I can.
Yeah.
At it. And,
yeah, you do pretty well.
And people will say like, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Right. So even like in terms of feedback, I feel like you would, if you missed it, you go, I got to try to get there. Right, and just see it myself, or connect somehow.
And it's all day, like even for like the morning, or stuff like that. Right on. Yeah, it's a very, very powerful event, and it was weird for me to see. I think I have probably from an outsider the most growth. Like I didn't hear like with the event from an outsider looking. I had nobody, or I had no idea, or no friends, or nobody really related or know of the event for the first 2 years. Right. Third year I show up because of like mutual friends on the organizing committee. The fourth year I show up and I'm like supporting it. I'm like sharing whatever I can on social media, right? And be like, oh, come check this out. And then going for like, I think I went for 8 hours. Yeah, good time. And then being one of the MCs this year was like crazy. Like to see that development for myself, just personally. Yeah, it was really cool to see and then introduce people and stuff. I was like, man, this is a little terrifying. Like that was sprung on me, right? Like that day. Yeah. So I was like, oh, cool. I guess one or two people couldn't make it for like personal reasons. And then, I subbed in, was like, all right, let's have some fun. Yeah. So yeah, it was cool. So yeah, it's really interesting to see. But kind of jumping forward a bit, I'm curious, what's the end game? Is the end game like, would you like to run for Prime Minister one day? Is that, I gotta know. People want to know. I want to know as well, mainly. But
so it'd be a weird leap to go, because I'm provincial, so I'd have to secure a seat federally and then run for the leader of the party and then whatever else.
So it's like
there's a lot
timely
of
process.
I would look into it. I'm pretty happy with what I'm doing right now, and it sounds like a very political thing, like because in the States are like people are running for president now, right? And like and there's all these people who have like announced but haven't officially announced, and they're like, oh, I'm talking to the family, like and I'm not trying to say that, but I'm relatively new. This is my second term as an MPP. Realistically, you don't fully understand how things work outside of the basics. I found for myself until about the third year. Like I knew question period and I knew where to go and but why we do certain things and what makes sense and things like that. You start sort of connecting the dots and understanding debate a little bit better outside of the notes and sharing stories and building relationships with people from other parties and things like that. All of that didn't really make sense until around the third year where it started clicking into place,
Okay, yeah.
And so it's kind of like being hired at valet as a smelter worker and someone saying, hey, do you want to be president of the union? Or do you want to be president of valet? And you're like, well, maybe one day, but
it feels like a lot of responsibility.
A bit of a steep learning curve. And so the things I'm really passionate about, I get to do. So I'm really thrilled to be the labor critic, because I love workers, right? I grew up in a real working class neighborhood, growing up in the Donovan. I have a real respect for blue collar work. I have a real respect for, I was telling someone the other day, a lot of people like love or hate Elon Musk, depending. And I don't really care about billionaires. I think it's interesting, or millionaires, right? So a famous athlete or whatever else. I think it's cool. I think whatever else, but I think in general they have enough accolades. Yeah. And what I find exciting is like the stuff that the people from My Sin City did, or Wendy's story, or that's the stuff that inspires me. I get really emotional when I go to like a wedding, and it's just or like an anniversary party or something, and it's just a family. Yeah. Right? Just a normal, it's not the Kardashians, they're all decked out in custom clothes. They're just like having a good time and like, or they're getting ready to go hunting or something. Yeah. That's the stuff I always like resonates with me and I like. And so as labor critic, I do a lot of stuff with workers. I meet with management as well and employers as well. But there's so much we can do for workers right now. Like we shouldn't be in a situation where people work full time and go to food banks. Right? No. That's ridiculous, right? We shouldn't be in these situations like where people just can't afford to make ends meet.
There's upper class, lower class, and middle class.
Yeah, and that divide is just
it's
growing,
huge.
Right?
It's huge.
And so I'm passionate about that. And as leader of a party or as prime minister, I mean, as an MPP, you have to know about everything. But as a critic, you can really dig your teeth into certain issues. And so, as labor critic, I really get to look at how do we make life better for workers. I think of myself a lot, like at 5 years old, living on Cabot Street, right? And I remember hearing, I was the prime minister or whatever else, talking about like eliminating child poverty. In this 25-year plan. I'm 50 now.
Yeah.
Right? We haven't eliminated it. If anything has gotten worse. Right?
Yeah.
So where's that dedication, and where are we? How come we haven't been successful? Right? And it's not accidental. It's not we tried stuff and it didn't work.
All right.
We didn't do anything but do some photos and say we're helping and we're doing this, right? Like but that's that's what gets me passionate, is like, how do we help regular people make ends meet and be more successful?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. What is that? What does that look like? Like, how do you, if we were to look at it and go, not really any obstacles or anything, but no crazy red tape or anything, right? If you can just, perfect world, which we don't live in, but perfect world scenario, how does that get fixed? Like, where does that adjust? Because I feel something's got to give. Right. Either they have to get like lower so middle class can kind of like even out that way, but something's got to give where. Yeah. I'm curious how that, like, what the steps are for a solution.
A friend of mine once, he said, I was very new in my career and he was retiring, and he said, over the years people take crumb after crumb, and then like a couple of decades later you look over and they stole the loaf. Right? Yeah. And so there was a time where you can make a good living in retail. Yep. Right? There was a time where like we've got in this weird situation of idolizing people who are ultra wealthy and sort of looking down our nose on somebody who doesn't have a cool job that's Instagram worthy, right?
Of course.
And that's broken. And we also spent 40 years telling people that if we help the ultra wealthy, I'm starting to sound like Bernie now, but like if we help the ultra wealthy, if we give them even more tax breaks and incentives, that'll trickle down to all our employees. But we're not seeing that, right? Like this summer, we saw Metro workers on strike because they can't buy groceries at Metro.
Hilarious, yeah.
Right?
Like what's going on?
Like Metro's a healthy company, right? And so we have to be more clear that people who are working like deserve to make decent wages. I'm talking about rich. Yeah. But all of us grew up with the American dream, right? Of the little picket fence and
yeah.
But 100%. Like. Yeah. You should be able to, if you're working full time, you should be able to afford a house, right? Maybe not the biggest house, but you should be able to, or at least 3-bedroom.
Yeah.
Like people
that's crazy,
right?
Yeah.
Like my son is going to be graduating this year. He's taking teacher's college. He can graduate this year, but he's very clear that he'll never own a house. So he'll say, "I'll own a house like when you and mom pass away." But
it's just it's just not on the scope.
It's not even a realistic idea. Yeah. We've got to change that. It can't be. Yeah. We can't do this anymore. We can't pretend it's okay. We can't pretend as government, and at all levels, government does this, where they talk about how important seniors are, but ignore the fact that a lot of seniors live in poverty. Right? We can't pretend that social assistance like OW and ODSP that aren't even high enough to cover market rent are enough for people to live on. Right? We just the way you solve poverty is that you ensure people have enough for their basic needs and for housing. Right? And then that moves forward. We've got to get away from the fact that we don't fund post-secondary properly. Ontario is the lowest across Canada. Canada's not great to begin with, but Ontario funds at the lowest level across Canada. And as a result, we have this really high reliance on international students, which I think is great. It's changing the demographics of our city. Yes. I love all of this, but it has become a piggy bank that you depend on international students. And even students coming in this year, they don't know what their tuition is going to be next year. There's no controls about how much they can raise it. So they can, probably wouldn't do it, but they could double it if they wanted to, right? We need more things that... with all the care that has gone into protecting the wealthiest people in our country, we have to put that care in protecting the middle class, the working class people, so they can be successful.
Do you think it's just not access to the right information to become wealthy or to grow like a skill set, or to put more money into their own education and personal education so that they can acquire skills to...
It's
you know?
a little bit that, but you know, like I met a lady who I told her she'd write a book. Her story is fascinating.
Amazing.
So she basically turned her life around and became an engineer. And when I had met her, she said, I can't find a place to rent. She's going from these like Airbnb contracts that are 6 months long.
Yeah.
And she's like, I want to buy a house at some point, but like I can't even save money for a mortgage because I can't get a rental space.
Yeah, because you can't save money renting
Right?
because it's even
And
there.
so in her field, she makes more than $100,000 a year and can't get ahead. There's something broken with this system, right?
That's bad, yeah.
You know, I met another lady who,
So it like almost doesn't matter
yeah,
to an extent.
yeah. I met another
Tough.
lady who was in Sudbury housing.
Yeah.
She's a PSW. She went through some hard times.
Yeah.
Ended up in Sudbury housing, got back on her feet, and she said, "I've got to get out of here." And not like it wasn't a stigma
Yeah.
thing, right? It wasn't. I don't want to be in Sudbury housing. It was like someone needs this place.
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
need
not
to be here. But it's geared to income. So as her wages went up, more and more money went to Sudbury housing.
Yeah.
So she couldn't get first and last to move to a non-geared to place, right? Those are the things we need to fix for red tape. Because
Yeah.
there's someone who desperately needs to be in Sudbury. Like I grew up in Sudbury housing. We needed to
Yeah.
be there. My mom didn't make enough money. But we need to fix things so that people can get ahead in life and stop pretending that if we just keep cutting taxes for the wealthiest corporations, it'll trickle down. It just doesn't
Yeah.
happen that way, right?
No.
We've
No, it
got to
doesn't.
put our thumb on the scale a little bit for just regular working people.
One thing I found too, and here's an example as well, you mentioned with the Sudbury housing stuff. So I work as a maintenance supervisor for townhouse co-ops, and then I do service calls for a handful of different, like just on the side and stuff like that. So I'm in and out of a lot of buildings, right, throughout
Yeah.
my day, and I talk to a lot of people in that space. Right, my old business partner, he used to work in Sudbury housing for about 7 years.
Yeah.
Semantics, and he was like, he would tell me the stories, and I would hear, but then I find out that there's like, to your point of there needs to be, like, they're taking from somebody, right, that needs to
Right.
be there. Is I know of a handful of different people who they would lie on their lease and say that they have 3 kids,
Oh, okay.
right, or 2 kids, so that they get a 3-bedroom when they actually have 1 kid, right, and
Right.
little stuff like that. But then nobody checks on that. So then after how many years? But then there's a family with 3 kids
Who need a
and
place.
yeah, exactly. So like there's a weird, like I see that stuff at that end,
Yeah.
and then I see how it's not trickling down, like it doesn't affect. So it's weird. It's almost like somebody needs to follow up with that type of stuff. But there's a lot of like loopholes and stuff I see like that are being exploited, and it's tough because we see the difference between the people who actually need it, who are trying, or who
Yeah.
are new to this country, right, and stuff, or who actually have
Yeah.
to be on like
Yeah.
ODSP and all these disabilities, right? And then
Yeah.
I see the other side of how there's people there that I'll see that they have, so the woman has 3 kids or 2 kids, right? Whatever. She's paying whatever rent because she's doesn't work or whatever at the
Yeah.
reason. And then she'll have her boyfriend come in, not go on the lease. He's making $80,000 a year or whatever.
Right.
Now it's like a weird almost, but then he's living there.
Right.
And it's a weird like exploitation of it. So now his rent is like, well, 0,
Yeah.
right, in theory, or he just pitches towards them and then they're able to buy the boat, buy the trailer, and have all these nice things.
Yeah.
It's a weird mix because I see that side of it, and I also see the side of, but it's all at that end, like the lower end, that I'm like, it's tough. So it's
Yeah.
like, I find it always comes down to intent. Like,
Right.
what's the individual person's intent, right? Like the woman who's trying to get ahead and like, hey, I need to get out so somebody else can get in.
Yeah.
Right? So it's tricky.
It's
tough to
like
decipher.
everything. There's that 90-10 rule, right? So
Yeah.
90% of your resources go towards 10% of the people, right? So in any organization, you're going to have things
Interesting,
like that, right? So
Yeah.
So even like because I'm a psych major, right? So there's lots of stats and stuff. So you take any population, doesn't matter. You're looking at kids at school, right? And it basically looks like a sleeping brontosaurus, right? Sort of tail end, big lump, head end. right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so you're doing a race. A bunch of kids are super fast. Most of them are in the middle. Some are here.
Yeah.
So if you look at like any system open for abuse, there's a bunch of people who follow every single rule. There's
Oh,
a
yeah.
bunch of people in the middle who are like doing the best they can. Maybe they're late on their rent sometimes. Maybe they're
Yeah.
right, but they're generally okay
For the most part,
And,
yeah,
and there's some
80-20.
horrible people.
Yeah, which you
at
get,
the
yeah,
end,
like I
right?
said, everything.
And so typically when you're middle class or when you're poor, when things go wrong, the government loves to make an example out of you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
But you look at Galen Weston when they were caught ripping off people for the price of bread. The penalty was he had to give out gift cards so you could shop at his grocery store, right?
Yeah.
How was that a
I remember
penalty?
Yeah.
right? You know what I mean? Like,
It's like, yeah, it doesn't make sense.
right? Like the
Yeah.
guy who was ripping me off on bread, I got to buy bread from him now.
It's like I was already doing that.
You know, and
Yeah.
and so you do have to fix things. You do have to monitor things, but I feel sometimes that certain things are really amplified, so
Yeah.
that it's easy. There's an expression: it's easier to kick down than kick up, right? So
Yes, very.
So if you find out someone is someone's on OW and they broke the rule somehow, well, that probably everyone on OW is like that, right? They're probably all that trucks and it's. I grew up there. It's not true,
No.
right?
No, you're right.
But there are some people, right? And it wrecks it, and it's that like there's 10% that are going to ruin it for the 90%.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately what we need to do is find ways for people to be successful, so they're not living in subway housing. There was a lady I met during the first election, who I saw again. She was like, I knew you were going to come knock on my door again, right? But she had told me she had 2 kids, and she said, I found a job, and it's not a great job. It's a minimum wage job, but I had kids when I was young, and I want to show my boys that hard work pays off, and it's important.
Damn right. Let's go.
Right?
Nice.
And so
Yeah.
she said it's a minimum wage job, and I went to it, and she said, I make $5, not an hour, $5 at the end of the week after childcare and transportation and stuff. So if the system is designed so outwardly, you're looking at people in OW and you're like, hey, pull yourself out of your bootstraps and work hard and whatever. But if the system is designed so that you go to work and you make $5 for the week, or you stay home and not work and you make $5 less.
It's not that much of an incentive.
Yeah,
There's
right?
no incentive really.
And so
And she's working her ass off.
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
She's waking up early in the morning. She's getting her kids ready.
Yeah.
She's right. And life is easier to not do that. She's driven to do it.
yeah, amazing.
But we gotta make it so that
Interesting.
the system and the amount that is sort of clawed back from OW and stuff
Yeah.
incentivizes people to work more. If they're able to work more.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people who just can't. That's the reality
And
of
that
the
is why
population.
that system does exist.
But
Yeah.
but people who want to move forward, and the lady who was a PSW and got back on her feet and was making a decent income is a perfect example where
Yeah.
the system is broken. It's geared to income so that I don't move there, right, and have a really affordable rent with a decent wage.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to get out of there, there has to be a way for you to apply for a service where that you get a break on your rent for 2 months, so you're able to get first and last to leave.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's whenever I hear the government talk about red tape, I'm always like, how come we can't fix this red tape?
Yeah.
Right? There's on a tangent for red tape. There's a cancer medication that you can take home. It's like a pill. If you're in the hospital, they give it to you. It's covered. If you take it home and you administer it yourself, you pay up front and then you file a bunch of paperwork and they reimburse you.
Okay.
That's red tape we can eliminate.
Yeah.
Right? We're already paying in the hospital, plus you're paying whatever it costs to keep the person in the hospital. If they're at home, it's the same thing, so why are they paying up front?
Yeah.
And it's not cheap, it's like 10 grand.
Yeah.
Right? So why are they finding the money, paying up front, doing the paperwork? And in a lot of these situations
yeah.
too, it's a parent who's doing this. Right? So the parent's exhausted from, I don't know what the treatment is, chemo or whatever else, but it's draining, right? Cancer medication.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Right? You're stressed out, you're worried, you're hoping you're not going to die. You're taking this medication that's just beating the crap out of you, right? And then you've got to do paperwork on top of it and remember to file it on time and all that stuff. And one story that was shared, and it was actually an MPP, it happened to her husband who had passed away.
Yeah.
After he died, she found the paperwork. So she found out the debt that was there and that he wasn't able to do it. So imagine that you're dying and you're leaving the debt to your family and the paperwork to your family, right? Like you're set to fail in a bunch of different ways, and it's unnecessary.
Yeah, very.
You know?
Yeah. Wow. Jeez. What oh wow. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm sure we both can go back and forth. I've known too many people in the space, and then I'm having worked in the space and seeing all of it.
Yeah.
And it's okay. So yeah, more incentives to work.
It's not like that sounds like such a boilerplate thing, but
yeah.
But there's.
So I'm trying to get a very.
I can't remember the numbers specifically off my head, but as you work, say you're on OW, right? So as you work, there's a certain amount of money you're allowed to keep, and then after a certain point, dollar for dollar, sort of removed from OW and stuff. But the reality is that if you're single on OW, you make less than $1,000, right? And rent is basically a grand in town, right?
Grand, yeah.
So if you want people to get on their feet, and I'm not an economist, sorry, I can't even say economist, right? But there are better models that will incentivize people that the more they work, the more they're able to earn. So people who are able to work are able to get a decent income that incentivizes them to continue working instead of going to the point where they're like, this financially doesn't make sense. I'm busy all the time, but I'm not getting further ahead. It's like anyone else. If you were working overtime but weren't getting any money for it, you would stop working overtime.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Simple as that, yeah.
I talked about Rick Melanson earlier. One of the things he said all the time is, I like my job, but if you stop paying me, I'm not coming anymore. Right?
Yeah.
And so it's that sort of thing,
said,
like where, you know, put aside the people who, for whatever reason, are unable to work, right?
Yeah.
They have child commitments, family commitments, mental health, whatever it is, aren't able to work. But the people who are and want to, we have to make the pathway into the workforce easier and not just pretend that it's hard work, grit, and determination.
Right.
You know, like we have to motivate people in a way that makes sense so they're being rewarded for the work they're doing to get back into the workforce when they're able to.
Interesting, yeah. I appreciate you adding the detail, like when they're able to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So switching gears a bit, what are you most looking forward to in the new in the federal election? You mentioned it early at the beginning, and I'm curious because I know because like it could be it's what 20 not next fall in theory.
Yeah,
I think it was like late October next year or 2025 or something. I don't know.
I can't remember the next fall or the one afterwards.
Feels like a while.
So it's a minority government, which means that they could trigger an election at any time. There's been a lot of framing around the NDP propping up the Liberal government. I'm not trying to do damage control around it, but I feel the messaging hasn't worked well. So what's happened was they're in a situation where the NDP kind of holds the balance of power. They could trigger an election.
Yeah.
So one is that I don't think anyone really wants an election to be triggered. Maybe now they do, but right after the last one, first, elections cost a ton of money, not just for the party, but for taxpayers and stuff, right? Because you have to set up the election boxes and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So it costs a lot of money to run one. People get pretty fed up, right, if you're triggering one right away. And so what the New Democrats did is they said, look, what we want is dental care and pharma care and anti-scab legislation. There's a couple of things they spelled out. If we can meet these things. So anti-scab federally is coming up around Christmas time, I think. And basically they said, look, if you can work with us, then we won't trigger the election, right? So some of the dental care is coming for seniors. Some of the there's little things that are coming forward.
Yeah.
I really wish that at the federal level they were better at communicating how it's working because, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives have framed it as this sort of no matter what happens, best friends forever. And that's not really right, or they call it a coalition. A coalition government isn't that. A coalition government is like two parties come together, and some of the members of each party are also ministers.
Yeah.
So it's not really that. It's just that, look, we've agreed that this is what we want to accomplish as opposition and government. If we're aligned, let's go together on it. If we're not, then we're going to separate. So it's an interesting thing to be in. And when you think back to Medicare, right, so Tommy Douglas and all that stuff, that really was that system, right? Is leveraging as opposition to get as much as you can in negotiations.
Yes.
And so we're kind of in that system again. I think that people are fed up federally with Justin Trudeau, not just because I'm a New Democrat, but I think I think any politician at the leadership role, like as the mayor, premier, prime minister, at some point, like. People love Stephen Harper. They don't like Stephen Harper. Right?
Yeah, it comes in waves.
Right? It just
I don't think COVID helped his case.
It's cyclical, right? So, so I think he's coming to the end of it. Maybe he'll hang on again. I think one of the reasons he has hung on is because the Conservatives haven't really given a strong candidate. Yeah. To come forward, that's resonate with people, and I think that people they're looking for more than get rid of this guy. Right. Because we've gone through that in the past, right? This, like provincially, we got rid of Kathleen Wynne and Dalton McGuinty because they are, hydro is so expensive. Hydro's still going up.
Yep.
We got Doug Ford, nothing's changed, right? Hydro's still going up. People can't afford rent, right? And then at some point, Doug Ford will run out of runway and we'll pivot back. So federally, I really want people to look at, not just because I'm a New Democrat, but like look at the system that you've been going back and forth with conservatives and liberals, and life has not gotten better.
No.
There's been a lot of pointing the finger and saying that, liberal government did a terrible job, and then that conservative government did a terrible job.
Playing
and then,
ping pong.
But life in general for people, like when I see the Freedom Rally stuff and the people with the flags and stuff being upset, the core of that is, hey, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to at my end.
Yeah.
Right? I'm doing all the stuff that, like, I go to work every day and my taxes go up. And why is life getting harder for me? And why are my kids living in my basement? And why are there no opportunities? And so the solution to that isn't swinging back to Stephen Harper from Trudeau.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're going to get the same party doing this. Like it doesn't matter if it's Pierre Poilievre now or Andrew Scheer before that or whatever else. Conservatives do what conservatives do. They love to privatize. Yeah. Right? They love to give corporate tax incentives. They love to, right? Liberals kind of do the same thing, selling off Hydro One, that kind of thing. But, so New Democrats have always been about sort of the working class and sort of shared prosperity, right? You can be wealthy and stuff, but, you got to pay your fair share, too. It's not fair.
100%.
It's not fair for the guy working full-time to pay higher taxes than someone who's making more money and whatever else, and it's not about taxing but just we all pay a fair freight to get ahead in life, right? Yeah. And so I'm really hopeful in this election that people look at New Democrats. I mean, look at Charlie Angus and what he stands for and what he does, right? And try to elect people who are actually going to be there for workers the way that the NDP was when I was on strike. Actually show up for workers and be their voice. And not just the ones that are in photos or videos saying I care about workers and doing photo ops, you know?
Yeah.
Marit Stiles said something about a month ago that's been stuck in my head. She said there's a lot of politicians doing working class cosplay. And I love that thing because there are a lot of people who have been born with a silver spoon. Yeah. And they love to dress up like workers, and they love to pretend they're working class.
Yeah, they got bright, clean work boots at the photo op, and like,
you've
never been on a construction site.
Yeah,
those just got out of the Mark's Work Warehouse box. What's going on here, Jamie? Yeah. If you could wave a magic wand, and let's say at the federal level, country, wave a magic wand, you could fix this one thing. Major, what would you do? Or better yet, what skill set would you implement or would you want the leader to have that you don't think is either done well enough or done talked enough? Or
the first thing that I think federally or provincially that we got to address that is just, it's a shared shame for our history, has to do with our treaties. But more to the point, the fact that we don't have clean drinking water, it's unacceptable, right? There are places in Ontario that haven't had clean drinking water for 30 years or more, for a generation. Just think about when they do pipe repairs on your street and you got to run the brown water for an hour when they're done, you can't turn the taps on for 8 hours.
30 years.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And there's been this political football that the province goes, well, it's the feds, and the feds go, it's the province. Yes. And so I think if you want to show leadership, just address that. I don't care if it takes a long time. If there are 30 of them that have to be addressed, and the first year you're like, I got 2, right? Yeah. But there's been so little movement on this.
Progress, yeah.
Right? That just every politician, when they're knocking on doors, when they're doing their speeches and the big debates that are covered and stuff, talk about how important everybody is and a better life for people. If you can't fix drinking water, then don't run.
Yeah, nothing else matters.
Right?
At that point, yeah.
And so,
basic human right.
Look, that's only going to help people living in those communities, but but you could be the person who'd be remembered in history as the person who helped those communities and fixed it. Massive. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the one that comes to mind because it's so overdue and unacceptable, and we wouldn't accept it even for your neighborhood, let alone our city, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to stop sticking our head in the ground and pretending, that we're making progress when it comes to treaties or making progress when it comes to indigenous relationships when we have places that don't have clean drinking water and turn a blind eye to it. Yeah. So that's the one that comes to mind is you want to show leadership, let's address this, right?
Yeah.
And I don't care. Andrew Horvath, when she was the leader of our party before she became the mayor of Hamilton after the last election, she said at one point, like, we're going to fix drinking water and then we'll fight the feds on who pays for it. And I think that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Just why are these little communities fighting over it, and why are they arguing about if it's
Somebody has to
provincial or
represent
federal?
them.
Why doesn't just the
right.
federal or provincial party do it, and then you guys could fight in court?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, let them do
How about it, right?
Yeah.
But I think that
Interesting.
the number one thing we're seeing federally, provincially, municipally, whatever else is affordability. That life is just not affordable, and it's crushingly difficult for people.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing our homeless population grow. We're seeing more and more people who have several roommates, right? And when you have a population thinking, I can't get ahead, and I don't mean ahead like I can't contribute to my pension plan, like I don't know if I'm going to have food.
Yeah.
That kind of thing on a regular basis. When young people who are graduating don't have hope, that's the thing we got to tackle. And there are things that can be done at a government level that aren't being done. When I go to a grocery store, my son's vegan. And so a lot of microwave popcorn has butter in it.
Yep.
So there's only 2 or 3 brands that are vegan, right? So when I go to one grocery store and there's a $4 difference for a pack of popcorn from one to the other one,
Come on, yeah.
right? You can't tell me that's supply and demand. That's gouging.
Oh, no, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it's
I'm
taking
not an
advantage.
expert, but
because
like-
he needs to have it like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not just that, but like when groceries go up, if, when maybe a decade ago, but years back when there was the beef, the bovine flu, I think it was called, but anyways, like tainted beef in Alberta, right? The price of beef was going up. That makes sense. That's supply and demand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that makes
There was a couple of years ago where they had really poor lettuce crops. The price of salads are really expensive and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's all realistic stuff.
Yeah.
But the fact that all the groceries are jumping up markedly,
Yeah.
right?
You have to pay for them anyway, right? You need to eat.
And when CEOs at shareholder meetings
Yeah.
are saying, well, we raise prices. Well, that's not supply and demand.
No.
That's people have to eat.
Yeah, it's survival.
And you're-
taking advantage
right?
of it.
Similarly for rent, right?
Yeah.
First, we got to fix the landlord-tenant board. It's broken for everybody. Landlords and tenants both hate it. It doesn't fix things. It doesn't help people.
Oh, God, no.
And that 90-10 rule I talked about before, you've got some really great tenants. You've got terrible tenants. We need to recognize that. You have some really great landlords. You have some terrible landlords,
Yeah.
right? So no one there is 100% great or terrible, but you have people who make the rest of the group look terrible on both sides. But the system right now for rent control is that any building that you build after 2018 has no rent control. Right? So we have to ensure that somebody who is a landlord is renting a place is able to make a profit and you shouldn't be out of pocket for
In theory, it's a
for
business.
what you're doing. Right.
Yeah.
Right? That's the system we have. People argue that there shouldn't be any sort of landlords or stuff. Right? But I'm saying the system we have right now, you have to be able to make a living if this is your business model, right? And most people in Sudbury, except for the larger landlords, most people, they rent a place and they live next door, or they've got like a small place they rent out, and it's basically a retirement plan, right?
Yeah.
They're hoping to pay off that mortgage so that when they retire, they'll have some income coming in,
Amazing, yeah.
right? But when you have a system where anything after 2018, there is no rent control,
Yeah.
well, that means that your rent is going to climb and climb and climb because you can do market rent. So some areas it won't affect, but like downtown Toronto, average rent, I think they said last year was $3,000. That's not sustainable, right?
No.
Right?
No, you're right.
And so you need a fair rent control system. I'm not talking about free rent, but a system where people aren't able, like right now, you could rent evict somebody. I didn't know this. I heard about this in Toronto, but it's happening in Sudbury now. So you can tell someone they're being evicted from their apartment because you're doing major renovations, but all you have to do is paint and change the windows,
Oh, wow.
right? And
Yeah,
so
like
you're
the baseline is not much.
Yeah. So, and there are some places where they're seriously doing major renovations because the building's really old. They're taking it down to the studs, a rebuild, right? That's what it's designed for. But there's a loophole that allows people to just basically paint and change the windows,
Jeez.
right?
Yeah.
And so your once affordable rental places go to market rent,
Yeah.
right? And so every time someone leaves, you can go to market rent, and which makes sense because you should be able to make a decent living, but it's getting to the point now where people aren't able to afford rent. And so instead of a 1-bedroom, you've got a 1-bedroom unit that has 5 people who are chipping in together, or 3 people chipping in together and stuff, right? And we have to get away from, we have to recognize how important affordability is for everybody. And how do you make that fair? It's not an easy solution, but that's something you got to focus on.
Right. Yeah. Nice. So with that being said, Jamie, to kind of conclude, do you have like a final wrap-up message or thing or lesson you want to learn, or you learned in the past that you want to like share, like more just like a final like point you want to drive home before we conclude?
I didn't really have one prepared, but I think because I was talking to students earlier today, and yesterday I was talking to Boilermakers, and we had the conversation about my career path, right? I was like, I was in psychology, and then I was an electrician, then Bell Canada, and then I worked at the smelter, and then health and safety, and now in MPP. And so I think like there's lots of opportunities in life to do different things and to find what inspires you.
Right.
And so, anything you're interested in, I think that if you talk to people who work in that field or volunteer in that field and you say, I want to learn more about whatever, podcasting.
Yeah.
If you're genuine about it, people who enjoy podcasting, for example, will tell you how to do it. And will give you advice, right?
Yeah.
And so I think as well, just thinking about students, my kids all went through this, right? They get to, I always want to say grade 13, even though it doesn't exist. That shows my age, right? But you get to your last year of high school, and it's basically, what do you want to do for the rest of your life, right? And it becomes super stressful. But, the things I thought I wanted to do, TV arts and advertising, and well, I never did any of that, right? I eventually got into psychology. I did very little of that, right? So it isn't that you're deciding forever, right? It's just you learn how to learn and have different experiences.
Right.
But if you sit down with a blank piece of paper and you just write every job that you can think of at 17 or 18 years old, you're more than likely not able to fill that page. And if you can, you probably can't fill the backside of the page.
No.
So, and part of that is you just don't know as a kid what exists. And part of that is there's all kinds of jobs that didn't exist. Like my job in health and safety didn't exist when I was born.
No, crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
So just, I think, for people who are younger in life, just realizing that there's a lot of stuff you don't know.
Yeah.
And the things that you're interested and passionate about, just connect with people who are in there and talk to them about it. And that's kind of, I think it's one of the things that you learn after so many years looking back, right?
Right. So to conclude, tell everybody where can they find you? Where can they, website, socials? Where can they reach out, connect, contact, all that fun stuff?
Well, as a politician, it's pretty easy to find, but it's social media is probably the easiest one. It's just at Jamie West NDP.
Easy.
So everywhere is that. Yeah.
Right
and
on.
then if you can just Google and find my email address, or
perfect.
There's a billboard.
Amazing. Yeah. If you're on your way to Chris's Independent, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Right on. Well, I expressed it at the beginning, but I'm very grateful for your time, sharing your story with the audience, and grateful you're able to be here today. So thank you very much, Jamie.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it. Right on.
Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, that's it.
Cool.